me.
So if you could just talk about the purpose of today's workshop for me now.
Yeah, so the purpose of today's workshop, so I'm going to try not to just read off the slides, but I guess, you know, that's kind of a little bit of what's going to be happening today. It's really to think about young people and mental health, especially at this time, what kind of things might influence how they're feeling, and in what ways we can support them, and in what ways parents can support them, and how they can approach young people in their family. You know, the last year has been a very difficult year with COVID, and lockdown has particularly affected young people because of the massive changes in their lives. So, you know, we'll touch on that briefly, whilst also giving a list of local and national resources and things that people can access, and apps as well. So we'll talk through that as well.
So yeah, so before we start, a few things. It'd be great if you can keep your microphone on mute. If you want to sort of like contribute to discussions, on Zoom there's a way you can raise your hands, or you can just put your hands up and just unmute and just say what you need to say. Obviously, I think if there's anything personal, ideally it'd be better if we don't discuss at this forum. We can discuss it afterwards. But we would like to keep this group interactive, so I think it's really important if you contribute towards the chat and just raise your hands up, and I think we'll be happy to, like, you know, engage in discussions. One key thing really, if you have experience of, like, you know, video, or it's a bit fuzzy, or you're losing stream, just switch off your video. It makes it slightly better, and just keep your audio on. Just letting you know that this workshop will be recorded. At this right moment, all I can see is myself and Romina, so everybody else is fine. And this is what will be on the video, basically. So, and yeah, so we will put this video on YouTube afterwards. I think it's really beneficial, like, you know, all the workshops that we've done, one of them has had nearly 100 views. So although we might have 30 people, 20 people attending, actually so many people have benefited by listening to it afterwards, watching it afterwards. So we take these workshops as learning resources for our work and put it on the YouTube and share it amongst our, you know, the community. I think it's obviously added benefit. Other people can watch it. It's really important that if I don't have your email address, that if you can, obviously, if you can just direct message me, that you can select Shamsu Chowdhury on chat and just send me your email address. It's really important that we have your email address so we can communicate with you and tell you what's happening in the future and how you can get involved with us. Thank you. And just quickly, before we move on to Ramina's presentation, just a quick information about our charity, the Bangladesh Mental Health Forum. So we're a local mental health charity. We're established in 1999, and we are based in Tower Hamlets. Our main objectives of what we do is we raise awareness of mental health in the community, and we obviously, the key thing is really overcoming stigma and challenges of, you know, people's perceptions of mental health, really. So that's our main aim, is to go out there and talk about mental health and overcome those challenges, and to tell people about, you know, how they can access services, what services are out there. So that is our main function. We do this quite with different avenues. So we do lots of workshops in the community. So like COVID, we go to schools. We go to you know, community centers, and we discuss and raise awareness of mental health and talk about local services. We can organize groups and activities. So currently we've got our women's group that Romina supports. It's called Let's Talk Forum. It's really good. There's 12 women in the group, and they're getting sort of active support from Romina and some peer support workers. So that's going on. I mean, hopefully in the process of setting something similar for men, because that's quite important as well. So hopefully we'll set up a men's group as well. But obviously when we go back into the community, we're hoping to do more proactive work in terms of, you know, creating, like, you know, well-being activities for people as well. We do lots of events in the community. So we try about 4 or 5 events, different parts of the borough, so we can get more people across the borough to learn about mental health and, you know, what we do. We have awareness materials. So we've produced lots of videos about what mental health is in Bengali. These are available on our YouTube channel, so you can access them there. We've also got a dual language leaflet. It's called Let's Talk About Mental Health. This leaflet is actually getting updating the information at this right moment. So it should be available on our website in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But also post COVID, where in the environment we can go out, we will actually print the leaflets and send it out to, GP practice and schools. And that will have information about all local services and, how to maintain well-being, similar to this workshop, to be honest with you. It was really, really helpful. So obviously, currently, we've gone very online at this right moment. It's been really good because we've had a national presence. I mean, we get people from Southampton, Bristol, all over the country. So it's really, really good that we're reaching out to everybody. So we've done lots of workshops at this right moment. We've probably done, this is probably our 10th, 12th one in the last 6 months. And they've been really successful and really well attended. So we're really happy that, people are finding it helpful. And it's something we'll probably continue moving on in the future doing. And the other thing that we've got going on is we've set up a signposting and information service just to people to call us if you want any help or support in terms of accessing service, or you want to speak to somebody in Bengali as a first point of contact. We're happy to speak to you and refer you to a mainstream service. So that's a service that you can access, which we'll mention later on as well and give you the details for. But as I mentioned as well, we set up this online group for women. It's called Let's Talk, very active, proactive, and it's going really, really well. So this is all the stuff that we're doing at this right moment. So yeah, so please stay in touch with us. Oh, goodness me, done it all wrong. Okay. So please do stay in touch with us. I'll give you our details at the end of the workshop in terms of my details and how you can stay in touch with us and how you can access all our social media and whatnot. So that's me done. Romina, it's down to you now.
Thank you very much. So yeah, if we can just go into the next slide. What we'd like to start off with is a case study. Really, we want to hear from you as well. We want everyone to get involved in this discussion if possible. So this is not based on a real person, but I guess the issues are ones that a lot of us may be very familiar with. So I'll just read through the case study, and like I said, I'd like to hear from you sort of any ideas. So Hasna, she's 13 years old, has been feeling anxious since returning to school in September. As a result, she's finding it hard to concentrate on her work and is falling behind. Hasna has been avoiding her friends at break times, and they're unsure why. Hasna's parents are worried about her too, because she spends most of her time at home in her room. When she isn't there, her parents have noticed that she's washing her hands a lot more than is recommended. So we'll just go to the questions and then we'll come back to this slide. So if we can just have some ideas from people, what do you think might be going on for Hasna? What support might help her?
So I'm happy for you to unmute yourself and contribute towards the discussion, but also use the chat forum, please.
Exactly. So what we can do is, just take note of those questions, and then we'll go back to the previous slide for people to have a look at. Should we go back to the previous slide? So yeah, does anybody have any ideas of what might be happening for Hasna? So obviously this is very much related to maybe COVID.
It seems like, sorry, I've just dropped my phone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, it seems like she's worried about COVID and catching the virus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely, and COVID is obviously having an impact on her, maybe making her feel more anxious, worries about the virus, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely one way of looking at it. Looking at the chat, somebody said anxiety. Absolutely, it sounds like she is having anxiety. Do we think the anxiety is just related to COVID, or do we think it might be related to other things?
I mean, can I say something? It's Susan.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think, sometimes when children are around this age, often their peers are very important to them anyway.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they're used to sort of going off and having that isolation a little bit and talking to their friends. But I think maybe the parent may want to speak to them on their own, you know, and just say, look, they've noticed that there is a little bit of a difference in them. What is she worried about? Because I think washing her hands a lot, I think it's probably linked to quite a bit of anxiety, really. And
Yeah.
talk to her about how, you know, about reassuring her.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Susan, it's cutting out. I can't actually hear you properly.
Now,
Is it all right if you could say something?
hear me now?
Yeah, no, it's cutting in and out. I don't know if it's to do with your mic. But what I kind of got from what you were saying was the ways in which parents can support their children in terms of returning back to school. I think what I heard initially is friendships being very important for young people, especially at this age, and there being some anxiety possibly around going back to school, sort of forming those friendships again, maybe some anxiety around that. I think that's what I was getting from what you were saying. I couldn't hear very much. But definitely there are different layers to where this anxiety might be coming from. So yeah, we have COVID. B, we have friendships that, you know, existed in the past. There's been a big break between them. So seeing them again in person, you know, can be quite anxiety provoking for sure. Somebody mentioned OCD. So OCD, otherwise known as obsessive compulsive disorder, is sometimes the way that it might present itself is that somebody is behaving in a way repeatedly to help reduce anxiety about something. So in this case, it could be that she's repeatedly washing her hands because she's afraid of catching COVID, she's feeling anxious about it. So when she washes her hand, it feels like it's reducing the anxiety, but only reduces it in the short term. And actually what happens is that, you know, she'd have to keep washing her hands to reduce the anxiety, but actually long term, it becomes a bit unhelpful for her.
So Rohela, you had raised your hands raised. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, it was basically just to echo what Susan said, really, and also she's also at that age, 13. It's quite challenging and vulnerable age as well. So there's a lot of I think I've just seen someone put up a message about, you know, hormone changes. So she's, you know, potentially is going through puberty, or you know, we don't know whether there is and some sort of element of bullying going there as well. You know, she's avoiding friends. Could be that she wants to maintain that social distancing. However, we don't know if there is, you know, some kind of bullying, you know, going on as well. So it's just that age is quite a vulnerable age.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rahila. I think you've made some really, really like very, very useful points in terms of just how many layers there are to the emotional experiences of young people. You know, it's a very complex time. Their brain is developing, you know, hormonal changes, you know, relationships, like very new relationships that are changing very quickly in terms of with, you know, family members, with school, etc. You know, thinking about, you know, them being in a school environment, the learning, they've taken such a long break from learning in the traditional sense of it being in the classroom with a teacher to now having to have directed their own learning. A lot of them may be feeling very anxious about returning to that learning environment and feeling like they're very behind in terms of, you know, the academic expectations. You know, their peers might be ahead of them. They might be feeling like, oh, I haven't caught up with this. I've missed out on so much learning. You know, at 13, that's kind of a strange time, isn't it? Because it's kind of transferring onto GCSE years. So the jump can be very big. So yeah, you guys have mentioned, you know, a lot of what might be happening for her. For Hasna, it's not just one thing that's causing her anxiety. You know, with COVID, there's the fear of catching COVID, but there are so many other issues that have come out of it that existed actually before COVID for teenage young people. So what kind of support may help? So yeah, I think Susan made a very good point about parents kind of anticipating some of this. So being aware of this before children are returning to school. So, you know, as they're like, you know, as children have been going back to school in the last week, you know, making a point of actually taking the kids to one side and having a conversation about these, about the things that might be worrying them. 13 is a very, that time of a child's life is a very strange time, because a lot of them don't actually even have the language to describe their emotional experience. So they might say, their behavior is demonstrating they're feeling anxious, feeling uncomfortable, but they might not have the words to actually express that. So it's about parents trying to help them understand where the anxiety is coming from, because as you can see, there are so many things that are contributing to it. So how might you talk to her? Do you guys have any ideas for how we might talk to someone like Hasna as a teacher, as a parent, as a support tutor, an ELSA member in the school? What kind of things can be said to her that might be helpful? Does anybody have any ideas?
I think the approach has to be very sensitive.
Yeah.
At their level, use appropriate language. So maybe just say, I've noticed some changes. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about anything? I'm here,
Yeah.
Just very, very subtle and very, very gentle.
Absolutely. I think, these are, very, very complicated, sensitive matters, and we should always approach them sensitively, no matter what the age. But, being very careful, being curious, and saying, I wonder if you're feeling anxious about going back to school, exploring that with them, trying to understand what's happening for them, being non-judgmental. What one person is finding very difficult, another person might not be. Offering to listen and be there. I think, Nazima, you've made some really good points about offering unconditional, positive regard. So normalizing it for them. So, really normalizing this. A lot of young people are going through this now. Making sure that they know that this is, a common experience. They Mind Online are doing lots of sort of online sort of blogs and stuff. So there are resources online that are available that can also be shared with young people to help them understand it. So Rahila made a really good point. So being culturally sensitive, exactly. So, especially if parents don't speak in English, they're speaking in Bangla. I think we're having an issue now where parents, their first language is not the same as a child's first language. So actually using support within the school to help facilitate some of these discussions around mental health, especially if mental health isn't spoken about as much within the home. It might be that you might want to get the support of a teacher to help have these conversations, or other sort of voluntary sector organizations, especially when there are issues that you think are, I think anxiety, everybody has anxiety, but I think if you're noticing that actually this, the washing hands is repeated, is stopping her from leaving the house, in the Hasna's case, we can see that this could potentially progress into something quite serious. So, I mean, we'll speak later on about when to get this support and what that might look like.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise that issue because during the pandemic, the lockdown, my son was experiencing similar things. He's only 8 years old and he's continually washing his hands.
Yeah.
And we're always telling him not to touch stuff when he goes outside, so he's very conscious of it.
Yeah.
And that was having a huge impact on him. I mean, his hands are getting dried up and whatnot. So we had to speak to him to make him understand.
Yeah.
He was worried that he's going to catch something. Yeah. So there was a lot of anxiety in terms of what we were saying. What's happening in the news that was impacting on him. And thankfully now, as we've progressed, it's a lot better, and he stopped doing that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you guys, played a role in really noticing the changes in his behavior and helping him to, reassuring him. I think reassurance is plays such a big role in helping young people and helping with anxiety. The issue is that children are getting very conflicting messages. Yeah. So on one hand, it's like, you need to be socially distanced. you need to be careful. You're not allowed to leave the house. On the other hand, they're being told to go to school, they're in their groups. A lot of children are not abiding by social distancing rules. So they're getting a lot of very conflicting messages. So on one hand, if I touch this, my family could potentially die. And on the other hand, it's like their friends are trying to play with them and hug them and etc. etc. So it's a very confusing time for them, or confusing time for everyone, but more so for them. But we'll move on to the next case study. I think a lot of these things are going to be covered as we go along anyway. So the next study, we have Yusuf, age 15. He's been extremely quiet and not talking much to his family, but they can hear him talking when he's in his room. His mum has noticed that his clothes smell unusual, maybe cigarettes. Yusuf seems to have a new friend. He no longer goes to football practice or sees his old friends. His parents are worried about him, and they found blades wrapped in tissue in his cupboard. He wears long sleeve tops or hoodies all the time, even in warm weather. So this situation's a bit more different. As you can see, his behavior is a little bit, is more different. And what he's withdrawn from is a bit more different as well. So again, sort of back to you guys, what are your thoughts? What do you think might be happening for Yusuf? And how might you approach it? Any ideas?
Again, very vulnerable age. I mean, reading this case study, I would say, obviously there's definitely something going on. Now could be, it could be cigarettes, it could be something else, or it could be that he's not looking after himself, a poor personal hygiene. And also, it seems like, there's been a lot of changes in his behaviour. He's obviously made new friends. And what's concerning is that, blades have been found wrapped in tissue, and he's wearing long sleeves, tops and hoodies. So is there some sort of self-harming, going on there? And these new friends, who are they and what are they doing? It seems like they've had a huge influence on the way he's behaving at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rahila. That's really helpful. Absolutely. I think, one of the first things that comes to my mind is around the risk factors, potential self-harm if he's wearing long sleeve, if you're finding blades and they're being hidden as well. These are signs that there may be, self-harm or even thoughts of self-harm, etc.
It could be that he's what was I going to say? Could be that he's being exploited and he's being groomed. Maybe he's involved with a local gang and he's being groomed into drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, young boys especially are at risk of being groomed in the community. So being aware of that. If he's making new friends, he's withdrawn from other friends, there's definitely that risk factor, 100%, being aware of that. I think, the fact that he is, his clothes are smelling unusual, he's been very quiet, potentially talking to someone who might not be there in his room, those can be signs of maybe potential psychosis, even very early onset psychosis, possibly drug induced. So another sign that it might be beyond cigarettes, for sure. But also I think, age 15, when we think about these young people and we think about the ways in which they're socializing and the platforms they're on, thinking about social media as well, thinking about, what's happening in his world outside of here, what's happening at school, is he struggling with something at school that's making him want to withdraw and seek other friends. So yeah, again, very similarly to Hasna, the issue is not just one story. There are multiple factors that are contributing to why a child is distressed, why a young person is experiencing distress, and why they're behaving in, you know, in ways that are very unusual for them. You know, there are many layers to this. There's never just one. Sorry.
I think before you look at, you know, what's going on in school, you need to look at the closer circle around him and what's going on there. And then you need to look at what's going on around his circle of friends, or the new friends that he's hanging around with, and what externally from that group has impacted him being with this, you know, in this negative way.
Of course. Absolutely. I think, you know, when we look at, you know, young people that, you know, take drugs or, you know, are being groomed into gangs, you know, etc. I think what we can see is that a lot of them have faced very early trauma. And some of that trauma could be, you know, within the home. It might be within the house that, you know, there have been situations that have been very traumatic for them, or at school, or, you know, as you said, within their close circles. So we do need to, when we're doing these, when we're you know, trying to find out what's happening for them, I think the story is not just about what's happening right now. It's very much about what has happened that they might be struggling to cope with, so are using things like drugs to help cope, self-harm to cope. He's obviously experiencing a lot of distress for one reason or another. So it's obviously related to something that happened, whether that's individually or within the family, outside of the family, school, local community.
So Susan, do you want to say something? You had your hands raised up.
Yeah, if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much clearer.
Oh, right. I'm very much in agreement with, is it Turan who last spoke?
That's right, yeah, Turan.
Yeah. Yeah, my feelings were that he's likely to have got into something that he can't control, and he's probably feeling quite guilty as well. Maybe towards his family, you know, with shame or what he's got himself into. And they feel that there's no way out of it. And blades could be for self-harming, they could be for drugs, or they could be as a self-protection tool to get himself out of a situation that he thinks he might, you know, find himself in. I mean, it does look an obvious self-harm, but I think there's lots of other, until you actually speak to the child and you say you're not going to be judgmental towards him. Yeah, it's a bit of a grey area.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's so hard to tell from just a few sentences exactly what's happening for someone like Yusuf. You know, you have to do a much more thorough, you know, exploration of it, because there could be so many reasons for each one of these things.
I think with knives and that age, obviously it varies for different cases, but majority of the cases, you know, when you look at like 15-year-old boys, it's normally a boy's carrying a blade because they're having to defend themselves or so and so. You know, once they're in a gang, then they have to protect themselves because someone else in another group is going to have a knife. So you know, there's been videos and interviews with youngsters, and they've turned around and said we carry it to protect ourselves. Yeah. So you know, but you have to look at, you know, like you're saying, Dr. Romana, you have to look at the smaller picture and the bigger picture, and you have to see what has impacted him to get into.
Absolutely. And you know, like little things like Yusuf, we would assume, you know, he's not going to be a, you know, is possibly not a white British boy. Like, you know, Yusuf, possibly a Muslim boy, ethnic minority. You know, we think about, you know, far right racism and their experiences of that now. You know, there are so many things happening in our society that is putting, you know, young people of color at risk, especially young boys of color, you know, who may be feeling, you know, at risk, you know, in society when they're walking around, so are wanting to protect themselves. You know, it really does go beyond, you know, what we're seeing just here in black and white. you know, there are definitely societal things that are contributing to this anxiety and this feeling of insecurity out in public spaces, which is possibly why they're being drawn to certain groups who are feeling similarly anxious, and are wanting to protect themselves as a group.
Shanaz, do you want to say something before we move on to the next bit? Shanaz?
Assalamualaikum, yes. So I just wanted to say, if a mother noticed those things, and where can she go to talk to somebody? Or, you know, she cannot talk to her son, he's not communicating. Who can she talk to?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good question. So at the end, what we'll do is we'll talk through some of the local and national organizations that parents can access to help support their children. But along the way, maybe we can think about some of the things that you can do with the child to help support them as well. Some of the early signs, what to look out for.
I'll say something.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, I'm Shada. Sometimes I think it's like, as a parent, we don't really realize what we say to our children. Sometimes it's like comparing to your relatives that affect them, but they can't. They seems like it's like no one understanding them. And like you say about cigarettes and things, it's like if he's a mother as well, sometimes mothers feel more pressure, like she feels she has to control everything, so she will check his clothes and this and that. This, yeah, we always seems to be understanding of like school's problem or friends' problem. I think sometimes as a parents, we need to think what action we take.
Yeah.
Constantly telling a child who is better than who, that affects them, and I think small things start to a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and also like, you know, even your own parent could say, oh, don't talk to your uncle, don't, you know, you're ashamed, or who's going to find out. I think these kind of things give a child anxiety,
Yeah.
and then it goes big. Like it starts, sometimes, you know, it can be start from home.
Excellent point. I think, you know, patterns in the family that have been there for years, that from generations that have been passed down, you know, they can be really, really hard to break. The example you gave about comparing, you know, one child to another, I've experienced that, like, you know, all my relatives have as well. It's a very common thing that people do, but can create a lot of insecurity for young people, especially if they're feeling not good enough, you know, they're feeling, you know, insecure, they're feeling, you know, it creates a lot of low self-esteem. And I think that's just one example of the ways in which parenting and parenting styles and communication styles can be very unhelpful for children. And it's not that we're blaming parents. I think, you know, these patterns have been there for so many years, through so many generations, and there's no manual for perfect parenting. You know, the world is evolving so much. But definitely paying attention to basic things like how you're speaking to your child can really have an influence on how they feel about themselves, and then what they do about those feelings. For sure. Thank you so
Can
much.
I say something on that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So like, yeah, same you say, being a parent, we need to start supporting from home, I think. So it might be a gesture, just hugging, or just using your kind voice towards them. Maybe like make your relationship open to when they are in teenager age, so they can come to you and talk to you more rather than hiding to you the things. So Alhamdulillah, I have 2 teenagers and we have lots of ups and downs. We could be together. My children really come to me and talk to me. However, it's like a supporting system. Like you need to start to support your children mentally or any other things from home, I think. Being a parent is like you need to take this responsibility. Then this is my children. I need to like support them how much as what happens and what they're doing. So if in that case, Yusuf case, I think if mom found something which is worrying her, she might to open up and maybe talk to him and like encourage him. and free, like a free conversation, like how much what he doing is nothing shameful. He can, there's space, always there is a room for improvement, always there is a comeback, and then always there's something, lots of supports around. So that's the things to introduce this young person, that the society is not shameful if you if you've done a wrong things once. It doesn't mean you are totally wrong. It might be you are experiencing something and there's another way you can come back to normal life.
Yeah, also I think it's like,
think,
if you
yeah,
accuse
every
your
relationship-
child, if you accuse your child and he's 15, if you accuse him he's not smoking, or like say his
Yeah.
friend is smoking, and because he's next to someone, the smell can come to their clothes. So
Yeah,
if you accuse
maybe.
them, that's when they go.
That's
They
why
think,
you need to
if
talk.
you're gonna
Like,
accuse me, I must do it.
yeah, that's why you need to talk technically, like not accusing them, like an open conversation. What happened in our families, like dad might be smoking openly in front of the children, and we might like, we have like a stigma. It's like, we know it's a bad thing, smoking, but when dad's smoking at home, they're seeing that dad's son are smoking, and when they are smoking, we blame them. Why are you doing that? So you need to be like, we need to make open conversation, like not accusing or not something, not blaming them.
I think, yeah, I think, you know, you're both making really good points about parenting and just the difficulties of parenting, and knowing how to approach these sensitive topics with young people, because approaching these topics, you know, there's a risk that it can go either way, where one way the child might then see it as an opportunity to open up to you, but the other way is pulling away from you. You know, and
Yeah.
obviously when parents are feeling distressed, it's so hard to know what to say. And it's so hard to contain your own distress and not be judgmental and not, you know, express your disappointment and not compare them to other children. You know, it's so difficult to do that, especially parents who have migrated to this country to give their kids a better life.
Yeah.
You know, it's been the sole purpose of the migration, you know, moving countries. There's so much pressure, you know, to do this perfectly with the children, as you know, when you don't have the support around you as well, and you don't have other examples to help you. You know, I think first generation parents are in a very, very difficult position with parenting their children in this country, you know, the culture of this country. As you said, like, even if the exposure is cigarettes at home from their own parents, you know, if that's just one example. I mean, they're exposed to so many things in the outside world as well that's, you know, not acceptable within the culture or religion. And how do parents approach that? It's very, very difficult. And children are very, you know, they're really struggling to find a balance between their, you know, what's expected from them at home within their culture, and then the dilemmas of living in this country and what the Western world would, you know, sees as acceptable. And poverty, you know, we're looking in, especially in Tower Hamlets, you know, there are very high levels of poverty. You know, they're struggling. They're in overcrowded accommodations. There are so many layers to this. I think that's what we're saying. You know, there are so many things that are stress factors for young people and their families. And coming to talks like this really helps to open our eyes to those things. So I think you guys are doing, you know, really great by coming here and contributing. So thank you. I am aware of time. So we'll
check those chat, because if I do it, I get a block on the computer.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, okay. So in the chat, what have we got? We've got some parents take children abroad due to shame, stigma, or even for rehab treatment, which often doesn't help the situation. Yeah, we've definitely heard of that. Sometimes just being present, available to children goes a long way, and regular checking in on them. Okay, so two very, very relevant points. I think parents being so afraid of, you know, what might happen for their children, they take their children back home with the hope that going back home will help them. And I think it's gone either way, where sometimes it's really helped them, it's given them a break, they've come back a bit more mature. But on the other hand, you know, it's really pushed them the other way, where they come back and the gap between them and their peers is even bigger. So I do think there needs to be more support for those parents here before taking such a drastic measure. So this is one of the things that we talk about today, is getting support early on. the sooner you get the support, the sooner you're preventing, you know, a bigger issue for young people, especially. So yeah, being present and available, yeah, not waiting for the worst thing to happen for parents to intervene, trying to make it part of the relationship to always check in on them is a really helpful way of monitoring any changes in the behavior, for sure. Shanaz has made a very good point, the lack of youth activities, the lack of funding for services for young people has really significantly affected how children's mental health and how they've been seeking belonging and seeking support and other things in other places that are unhelpful. I think this has been a very big issue. Okay, so mental health. So this is the continuum that we talk about, where you know, where we talk about, you know, at one stage they might be healthy, and then something happens, and then they start to cope, and they're trying to cope. So they might be like doing things to help manage the unsettling experience they're having, feeling a bit stressed, and then they start to struggle. When those coping strategies, they're not working, the distress is too high, they start to struggle. And then that struggling then turns into feeling very unwell. So what we're saying is that it doesn't go from one day you're healthy to next day you're so unwell. What we're saying is on a continuum. And as parents, it's monitoring that. So this regular checking in will give you the opportunity to monitor those stages in between. So, for example, noticing, oh, are they, like, you know, they're not sleeping as much as before. That's like an early warning sign. So we'll talk about those early warning signs. But what we're saying is that it's not one day healthy, one day completely unwell. We're not saying, this is the difference between good and bad days. Everybody has good and bad days. It's about before someone becomes severely unwell, you know, severe distress, they will go through particular stages. There will be signs in between. So yeah, so just being aware of that. Should we go into the next slide? So we've touched on this already. I think, you know, everybody here has been very, very, you know, helpful at sort of explaining that a child's mental health is contributed, a child's health, all types of health, their well-being, that is impacted by several factors. So like we said, there's the family factor, what families do, communication styles, patterns within the family, how its level of education within the family, the financial impact of the family, the living circumstances for this family, the number of siblings for this family. You know, there are so many dynamics within the family that contributes to a child's mental health. Within the school, where is the school? Resources within the school. What is the ethnic makeup of this school? Is the child like a minority within the school? Or is the child, you know, feeling, you know, like they are, you know, are they different to their peers? Are they similar to their peers? You know, what kind of resources are within the school? Are the teachers, you know, trained in supporting, you know, mental health? Like, do they work with the families? You know, are there other risk factors within the school? You know, and then the neighborhood, the community, what's happening in the community? Is there a very high rate of, you know, criminal activity within the community? But the opposite, are there a complete lack of resources within the community? Because what we're seeing is that lack of resources in the community means more rates of crime in the community, right? So we're seeing a correlation between that anyway. So what's happening in the neighborhood? Is it safe for them? Are they feeling safe there? The opposite, is there good resources within the community? And then obviously the political, social, cultural. So as we said, the racism, you know, austerity, lack of funding, you know, these things are contributing to all of those factors, the family, the school, and the neighborhood, and that will ripple down to the child. So what we're saying is a child's mental health is not just the child's responsibility alone. The child's mental health is being contributed by so many other factors that is beyond their control, often outside of the family's control as well, the school's control, the neighborhood's control. So it's being aware of all of these factors. And then obviously the child itself, how old is the child? Social media, the impact of social media, friendships, hormones. You know, there are so many factors here that we're trying to say contribute to mental health, not just one thing. Should we move on to the next? Oh, does anybody have anything to say about that before we move on to the next slide? Is that okay? Did that
I
make
just want
sense?
to say about the child itself. If they have mental health issues, who do they go to for help? I know the schools help. Is there organizations in the community as well? Or
Yeah, so we'll talk about that at the end, because we're going to do a bit of signposting at the end.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, as you said about, you made another point that it's hard to include every single risk factor, but parent mental health can often influence children's mental health. Are parents carers? Are they living in multi-generational families where their parents are carers for their grandparents, so the children are not getting as much of that parenting support? There are so many of these factors to be aware of, that we might take for granted. I think that's what we're saying, being aware of those. Children's mental health, there are so many risk factors, but there are so many protective factors as well. So protective factors in that, do they have siblings who are elder who can offer some support? Are there resources within the community? As we said, are there resources within the school? Family and parenting is very important. Family can be a strong sort of support, but challenges within the family will also affect children. Exactly. So as I said, with the circle and the issues within the family, I think, some parents, so this has been a very big issue that I've noticed, and many of my colleagues have noticed, where parents think that staying together in very harmful, abusive relationships is better than them separating. But actually, when we look at it, it's actually a lot more harmful for these children to witness these arguments, to witness this harm. Abuse happens in so many ways. It's not just the physical ways of abuse, the emotional abuse, the arguments, putting someone down, being critical, the swearing. Children who are exposed to that type of environment, will have high levels of distress. When separation processes happen in front of the children, we're not saying don't tell the children about it until you've had the divorce and then you tell them you've had a divorce. What we're saying is have appropriate conversations with them. It's about being appropriate to the level of the child. So again, families play such a big role in how these children are feeling, and their experiences of distress. Parents, putting the other parent down in front of the children, turning children against other parents. These things, it's very hard for children to cope with them. Again, we're saying that it's about appropriate conversations. It's not about avoiding it, and it's not about exposing everything to them. It's about what is suitable for them at the level that they're at. Some things, just should be appropriately communicated to children, and there are ways of doing that. So schools can be a source of achievement and a place of friendships, but can also bring challenges such as bullying or difficulties with learning. So another thing, especially children whose parents don't speak English, these children may struggle a bit more with the learning in school because they're having to learn the language at the same time, especially early on. And because of how hard that is, they might demonstrate more behavioral difficulties. So parents might not be able to support them as much with their academics. So if they're struggling more with the academics, obviously that's gonna create a lot more distress for these children. So being aware of that as well. Bullying doesn't just happen within the school between their peers. Bullying happens online now, is what we're witnessing, in really many different, very exposing forms that feel very permanent. So being aware of bullying in that sense, and and what kind of support are they being given within the school? As I said before, the neighborhood, the safety within the neighborhood, the resources, a sense of belonging. Are they, the isolated minority family within this very dominant white community, or, other types of experiences of inequality within the community really contributes to how a child is feeling and their sense of identity and their sense of self. Feeling embarrassed of being brown in predominantly white spaces. These have been big issues. And as we said, poverty, racism, services, these all influence children and family well-being. Did anybody have anything to add to that? It's difficult.
I just wanted to add something.
Sure.
Okay.
Of course.
It's missed off of the slide, but I think it's a really important thing to raise that, young people should feel most safe in their home, and yet we talk about bullying, but there's also bullying in the home, and there's a lot of conflict with separation due to domestic violence, and we've seen a rise in that from lockdown. So I think that can be very, very confusing for a child and can make them feel quite unsafe.
Absolutely. I completely agree. You know, the family system plays such an essential role in how a child develops and how a child is feeling. And those experiences of violence and abuse within the family is extremely influential in how a child feels. So yeah, Susan, thank you very much for raising that point. Did anybody else have anything else to add? Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so it's estimated that 1 in 10 children and young people aged between 5 and 15 have a diagnosable mental health difficulty. Between 1 in 12 and 1 in 15 children and young people deliberately self-harm, and admissions into hospitals have increased by 68% in the past 10 years. Half of all adult mental health problems have their onset before the age of 14, and 3/4 before the age of 24. So this is extremely important. You know, what we're saying is that when children are displaying distress through their behavior, through what they're saying, through what they're doing, if that is not addressed early on, if they're not given the support early on, it is very likely that that will then progress into more difficulties later on in their life. So we are really advocating for early support, early intervention support in helping them, because that is what will prevent further mental health difficulties in the future. You know, these statistics are very high, aren't they? So I think, you know, it's very important for parents to be aware, parents and schools and other people working with young people to be aware of those early warning signs. Should we move on to the next slide? So we've touched on a lot of these anyway, but yeah, some of the challenges faced by children and young people include bullying and cyberbullying and bullying within the home, as Susan has said. The impact of social media, the impact of it being that, yeah, there's the side of the cyberbullying, but there's the other side of creating very big levels of inequality. So children spending lots of time on social media, seeing people's, like, you know, very idolized lives, and that creating a lot of insecurity for them and a lot of shame for them. Body image and self-esteem, absolutely, again, perpetuated through social media and other forms of media, where there are unhealthy standards of what bodies should look like, what somebody should look like. You know, we've seen like a rise of like sort of surgery and sort of cosmetic surgeries, because, you know, there's been a rise of these idolized, you know, faces, what people should be looking like, which is, you know, leading to body image issues. Eating disorders. Eating disorders are extremely prevalent in young people. Exam stress and other pressures around learning and achievement, absolutely. Sexual development and relationships. You know, teenagers, you know, that's when they start to form some of those relationships for the first time, and it can be a very complicated experience with the layer of hormonal changes, and not having the experience of how to have some of these healthy relationships. So that can definitely be a stress factor. And violence and crime perpetuated by high levels of poverty as well. So yeah, see, these are some of the challenges. Did anybody have any other challenges that they were aware of that maybe hasn't been listed in this?
I just put in the chat honor-based abuse, because, you know, you see a lot of, I mean, it can happen to boys as well, stories. And that's kind of sort of like stems from initially bullying within the family, isn't it? And then, you know, some young female and male have been taken abroad because, you know, these people have been victims of honor-based abuse.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rahila. I think, you know, one massive challenge is this dilemma of, you know, the cultural difference between what's happening in the house and what's happening, you know, in the outside world, that is so different. You know, cultural expectations, you know, what's acceptable back home in Bangladesh, but then that being so different to what's acceptable here in England, you know. And I think that is definitely related to the honor-based abuse, and parents feeling such high levels of stress that their children are not abiding by these cultural norms and expectations because of how they're so stigmatized in the outside, in the country. So I think that's a really, really big challenge we should probably put on there as well. So those cultural differences and how children have to navigate that. So we'll definitely put that on a slide. Thank you, Rahila.
Just wanted to add, Ramila, that we are doing a workshop on eating disorders end of April.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to attend, yeah, just let me know. Pass me your email details. So yeah, so it's a relevant topic for young people. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you. And Rahila's just mentioned young people often struggle with their identity. Absolutely. You know, people are forming their identity in early adulthood, in, you know, when they're sort of in their teens, early 20s. This is a very vulnerable time for them. They're seeking a sense of belonging, you know, and if there is a high levels of racism and discrimination, then it's going to be harder for them to form that identity, which will lead to more experiences of distress, for sure. So children and young people may show their distress in different ways. So as we've mentioned before, the early signs might be things around sort of sleep problems and nightmares, bedwetting. You know, bedwetting has, you know, we've seen that bedwetting is often related to sexual abuse for children, you know, where they would wet the bed to keep people outside of their bed, you know, so this could be a sign as well. Or other things, you know, feeling anxiety and distress in the night. Behavioral problems where children are misbehaving more. Often, you know, we see that is related to anxiety and uncertainty in other areas of their life. Self-harm, as we've talked about, and self-harm happens in a number of ways. So there's obviously the more common ones we might know about is like cutting hands, but there are other, children might cut other parts of their body, like their inner thighs, where people won't be able to see as much, where their parents might not be able to see as much, or around their ankles, etc. There's also self-harm, like pulling their hair, scratching their head, scratching their bodies, using other types of tools like rubber bands and stuff. So again, you know, self-harm happens in a number of ways. You know, I've seen children pick the skin off their fingers, you know, pick the skin around their nails. You know, it can happen in so many ways. Unexplained physical pain. So sometimes distress might be described in terms of physical pain. They've got headaches, they've got stomach aches. Changes in behavior. I think this is a very key one. This is why we say parents should be aware of how their children are, getting to know their child, checking up on their child, because some of the changes are more subtle. You know, so not being as sociable with family, not wanting to go to school. I think those are really big ones, but some might be subtle changes. Like you might notice that they're not doing as much as they used to do. They're not doing the things that they used to enjoy on a more subtle level, but that can sometimes be a sign that something is happening. Social isolation, so withdrawing, and poor school performance, so academically struggling or just not wanting to do homework as much, or not getting the grades that they used to. These are expressions of how a child might be expressing distress.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's quite interesting that, you know, some of these behaviors and, you know, that we see actually impacts on parents' mental well-being as well.
Of course.
And that actually substantially impacts on relationship between, you know, the husband and the wife. And that's really important to recognize as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a really, really good point. You know, when we are feeling distressed, it's so hard for us to behave in very rational ways. And when you are seeing your child in distress, it's only natural you're going to experience a lot of very extreme emotions from that. And especially when you're like, you know, it's your eldest, you know, you don't even have anyone to map it on. This is the first time you're going through it. And, you know, parents may have different approaches to how they want to manage that behavior. And it can create conflict within the parents. And then if a child then witnesses the conflict between the parents, it might make the behavior even worse. So families can get into very, very difficult cycles because of how the behavior is, you know, is impacting the family, for sure. We've definitely seen a lot of that.
I think it's as a parent as well as the word we use, like say in Bengali, I find it easily, parents, like if they see any change or anything, they call them, you fagol or fagolo, things like this. And they really take that into their heart.
Yeah.
And they believe it as well. And also, like, I think we, as an Asian family, when our children say they don't like certain people coming to our house, we don't really question why. We think, oh, that's your uncle or this and that.
Yeah.
There is always something behind it. We believe that's a loving and things like this, but we don't really take action or try to listen. Our children, we think that's disrespect and things like this. And that's why I think it's like children, they find somewhere else to, you know, because all we care about is our reputation, our, you know, respect for each other. We're too much focusing on other people than our children, our own home.
Absolutely.
I think the problems that lie within our society, the Bangladeshi society, is one of the sisters mentioned earlier on. You know, speak. She's got 2 boys. You have to be open and speak with your kids. And if you speak and you have that free way of conversation, then it makes everything a lot easier to communicate. And that way, the children, if they're feeling any anxiety, they're able to speak to their parents. But we already, you know, the Bangladeshi community, that is, we already create a barrier. You know, this is I'm the father or I'm the mother. You're the child, and this is how it's going to be. And we lay out boundaries and stuff, and we don't freely and openly speak to our children. You know, we've recently had SRE, for instance, and all the parents were like, "Oh, how are we going to disclose this and this and that?" You know, and it became really uncomfortable for us. But had we a more Western kind of approach and an open approach, we'd be able to deliver it. You know, like for instance, with my children's school, like I said to the school that when they need this, I'll deliver it. You know, and like I've got an older daughter, and I've made lots of conversations with her regarding certain things. So it's if we can build that that pathway of speaking to our children, then that will terminate a lot of issues like anxiety and things like that that might arise, or you know, like the other child that was worried about the catching coronavirus and stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, you know, like we said, especially with the Bangladeshi community, you know, we have first generation parents who have been parented in such a different way. And, you know, approaching these topics that have never been approached to them is a very challenging experience. So I do think as a community, you know, yeah, we will need to have a think about how we can support some of those parents who haven't witnessed it before, don't really know how to approach these, you know, have significant language barriers between them and their kids, because a lot of the words like depression, like, you know, these words are very difficult to translate into Bangla. And, you know, do they have this conversation in Bangla or do they have it in English? I think language is becoming a very big issue. So yeah, I agree, we need to have more of these open conversations, create more trusting relationships between parents and their children, more comfortable ones. But there are many sort of cultural barriers here that we need to be aware of as well, for sure. Thank you. And it's nice to hear that so many of you are already having these open conversations. I think this is really good modeling for other parents. This is really good for normalizing to other parents that you can have these conversations. And in the short term, it creates a lot of anxiety and embarrassment and some shame. but actually in the long term, it prevents, you know, it prevents bigger problems from arising. So having these conversations out in the open, just as you two have, like, you know, saying to other families, you know, I'm having these conversations, these are the way I'm having them, I found them helpful. You know, that's how we can normalize it for other families as well. I think that's really important.
Also, there is lots of helps for parents as well. The only thing is they only look what's benefiting them. If you do something, if you keep yourself busy, you or busy and also visiting community centers and doing courses, you learn every day something, and then you experience yourself. I'm myself as a mother of 4 as well, but I think it's like when I was at home, I used to think it's just home and school. That's enough for my children, but I didn't really understand. Especially like we believe like, oh, they shouldn't be, you know, like our view need to be changed. We need to learn. We need more education. Also, there in Tar Hamlets, especially, there is a lot of community centers supporting parents, ESOL classes and things. And also, it's like parents need to be busy themselves to support their children. I think, you know. But as we run ESOL class, but I try to encourage the mothers. The life will change, but it seems like they don't really come out until something happened to their children, and then they think, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world," and most of the things just get hidden under the carpet.
Yeah. You know, what I'm hearing here is you know, parent mental health. You know, parents who are healthy, you know, and seek support, you know, for their own mental health, you know, those parents will be more equipped to deal with their children's mental health. So self-care is so important when we want to take care of others. You know, being well, like making the effort to stay well yourself, plays a very big role in how your children learn to take care of themselves as well. Absolutely. I'm again just aware of time and we have a few slides left. So I will move on, but yeah, please keep contributing, they're really helpful. So protective factors mean the things that will help preserve the mental health of children and young people, that will help them, that will make them feel better, that can be that can be good for them. So we have positive parenting, as we've spoken about today, being loved and feeling secure, and that can happen in a number of ways. So my parents often showed love and support through food. It was a big thing in our family, but you know, you'll find your ways of demonstrating your love and care to children, and sharing that with each other. A stable home environment, as we've spoken about loads today. Activities and interests, just as you know, Mashada, you just mentioned now. What kind of activities are happening, you know, keeping yourself active. It's not just school and home, it's thinking about other actives in the other time that is enhancing for children. Positive peer relationships, emotional resilience and positive thinking, and good engagement with education. I think emotional resilience, again, that comes from, you know, what's happening around us and the resources around us. You know, using cultural resources and religious resources where possible to help encourage that. You know, I'm noticing, you know, because it's the Bangladesh Mental Health Forum, you know, thinking about sort of Muslim hadiths and other stories within Islam that can be helpful for encouraging children to draw on those resources when they're feeling distress. You know, prayers, du'as, etc. You know, helping that, and that will help develop some of their emotional resilience as well. Okay, should we move on? Good mental health in children and young people. So being able to develop emotionally, creatively, intellectually, and spiritually. So again, we've touched on so many of these today. So it's, you know, when it comes to well-being, it's not just one part, it's trying to think of well-being across many different layers. So yeah, creativity, I think, is often something that's being missed, and that can happen in so many different ways: baking, cooking, drawing, etc. initiate, develop, and sustain mutually satisfying personal relationships. So, you know, sharing an activity with your child is one way of developing a relationship with them, doing fun things together, like it not just being a relationship where you just provide food, clothing, and a roof, which is hard, of course. You know, those things, you know, I don't want to take those for granted, but where possible, try to develop, you know, other ways of relating to them. That's how you can help create a stronger relationship as well. Face problems, resolve them, and learn from them in ways appropriate for the child's age. Absolutely, you know, sometimes it can be such a habit to face a problem and brush it under the carpet, never mention it ever again. You know, what we encourage is after you've faced a problem, take a moment to reflect on that with the child and say, actually, you know, what have we learned from that? If we face something like this again, what can we do? What can I do next time? You know, if you are noticing this early on, you know, what can you tell me? Like, you know, what can you show me so that I know what I need to do? You know, make a plan with them. Develop a sense of right and wrong. Absolutely, especially things like appropriate, you know, relationships with people, you know, in families, as somebody mentioned, you know, having just any uncle come into the house and not explaining these things to them, you know, talking through what's right and wrong, what's an appropriate touch, what isn't, what are appropriate relationships. Being confident and assertive, absolutely. And that comes from, you know, building these children's identities, praising them when they do something good, you know, teaching them good communication styles. Be aware of others and empathize with them. When you notice them in distress, don't shame them for it. You know, don't tell them they're not allowed to be upset. They shouldn't be distressed. Validate that for them. Oh, you were distressed because of this. I can see why that was upsetting for you. You know, what can we do to make this better? Or that's a really upsetting thing. I understand I would be upset too if that happened to me. You know, that type of language, teaching them to be empathic, validating their experience. Playing and learning, you know, as parents, it does, you know, the best thing about parenting is you can be playful, you can enjoy, you know, you can connect with the child part of you as well. So embrace that. Should we move on to the next slide? Supporting mental health, 5 ways of well-being. So this is a model you can Google. Again, it's you know, a little bit of advice for parents to how to maintain these relationships and how to model to children how they can maintain good mental health, good well-being all around. So so we say 5 ways of well-being in 5 areas that you should try and focus on for yourself and for your children and as a family. I think each of these things can be done as a family. So keep learning. Learn something new with your child. This goes beyond academic and learning from school. You know, learning new skills together, learning new activities together, learning new recipes together. You know, keep learning, keep that part of your brain active, connecting with them, find ways to connect with others, teaching them to connect with others, you know. Academic pressures and pressures of growing up can, you know, children might isolate themselves, but teach them to keep connecting with people around them. Take notice. This is a really good one. This is about being present in the moment. What's happening right now? You know, every day, try to teach them to be grateful for things that have happened every day. Oh, isn't it great that you managed to do this today? Isn't it great we did this together today? Teaching them to be present, not always thinking about the past and not always thinking about the future, but rather what's happening in the moment that's really good, helping them to appreciate and demonstrating gratitude. Giving, I think, you know, acts of service is also how we maintain good mental health. Teaching them to give to others is not just about us gaining and just about ourselves, but giving to others is also good for our well-being, and it helps develop relationships and helps keep people connected. And being active, I think there's so much evidence for how exercise is so excellent for well-being emotionally and physically, and parents should do it with their children. You model it from early, those children will carry it on into adulthood. The children whose parents are active, you know, they maintain activity later on as well. Okay, should we move on? Running against the time, we've got 10 minutes left. So impact of COVID. Absolutely.
Have you covered a bit of this earlier on?
We covered a lot of the COVID and how COVID has brought a lot of uncertainty, and how, you know, especially the Bangladeshi community has been heavily affected by it, which has created a lot of uncertainty for children. Going back to school is very difficult, and, you know, how families manage this, you know, anxiety for children. You know, this is so new, and it's had a huge impact on our families. So just being aware of that and seeking support for that.
Yeah, and I was going to mention, because I was coming back to my son again, you know, the news earlier on, you know, when people are dying and the impact he was having, it was actually having an impact on him.
Yes.
So, you know, access to information was quite critical. Too much of it wasn't actually good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And access to like other resources online, you know, to help support young people, explaining COVID to them in a way that they understand. So they're not just seeing death, death, death on the news. The news isn't appropriate for children. We know that. Like, you know, so it's news that's been adapted for children. Look for appropriate information for those children, for sure. So factors affecting mental health and well-being of children and young people in lockdown. Anxiety, loneliness, worries about school in the future, worries about family members, impact on mental well-being of family members, and groups especially affected, including young carers and those with pre-existing mental health difficulties. I think, yeah, we've covered a lot of this anyway, you know, how COVID has affected young people and the worries that they have. So how to support children and young people during COVID, validating their experience, normalizing it. It's a very scary time. It is, it's very worrying. Clear factual information about COVID. So this is why I say the news is catered for adults. Try to communicate what is happening in a way that is appropriate for the child, using diagrams, using illustrations, using online resources, using YouTube videos, supporting them to keep connections with friends and family. This is especially hard in families where there's only one device, one laptop between 4 kids, you know? This can be really hard, but find ways to keep connected with family. A lot of it will have to be online, but you know, as rules start loosening up, maybe, you know, meeting with a different friend in the park, you know, supporting them to do that. Keeping regular routines, children out of routines and getting them back into routine has been a huge issue for a lot of schools. So during lockdown, you know, and the weekends, if you can try and keep a regular routine, getting them to bed at a similar time, getting them to wake up at a similar time. So we've talked about social media news, spend time doing positive activities together, make the home environment somewhere fun, you know, try and make it creative, try do things together, do exercise videos together, fun things together, you know, pray together, you know, read together. You know, there are so many things that parents can do with their children. And we've talked about resources from online. So now we're on to the last part. So the support available. So these are the more national ones. So Young Minds is a national one that you can access. You may want to take a screenshot of this.
I will send it though. I will send everybody this.
You'll send it around, exactly. So for
you have to give me your email address to get it.
Yeah. So for Tower Hamlets residents, there is the Tower Hamlets Mental Health Crisis Line. So that's 24 hours. You can call them anytime if your child is having a mental health crisis, and they will be able to advise you. And the Muslim Youth Helpline. This is another national helpline, provides free, confidential support that is, you know, targeting, you know, Muslim young people. So those are their contact details. Should we move on to the next slide? So Tower Hamlets CAMS. So this is from the NHS. So CAMS is Children's and Adult Mental Health Service. It's a free service. You can be referred to them through your GP. Some of them accept self-referrals, but if you contact them, you'll find out how you can refer yourself to them. But they are for children and adolescents up until 18 who are experiencing mental health difficulties. Step Forward is a free counselling service for young people in Tower Hamlets, and Docklands Outreach also offer free information and therapeutic support for young people. And both of those they go beyond 18. So Step Forward is for up to 25-year-olds, and Docklands Outreach is up to 21-year-olds.
So, Ramin, I'm conscious there's lots of people from outside Tower Hamlets. So just letting them know that, you know, obviously the CAMS service is available in all, wherever you live. It will come under your Mental Health Trust Foundation. So if you type in wherever you live, your Mental Health Trust Foundation, who they should provide those services.
Absolutely.
But you should look locally. Obviously, these are locally funded organisations. Wherever you live, there will be services close to you. Hopefully, it's good thing for us in Tower Hamlets. We have lots of services, so we should utilise them.
Yeah.
But please do your own research in your own area. Similar services are there for young people and yourself.
Yeah, and a first point of call should be your GP, to be honest. You know, if your child is experiencing distress and you don't know where to go, contact your GP. Your GP will be able to refer you to your local children's service, your local CAM service, or be able to, and those CAM services should have links to a lot of the local organizations that would be of help.
I think this one, obviously, in Tower Hamlets, the CAM service have a more individualistic service within the schools.
Yeah.
Do you know much about this, Romina?
No.
So what's happening recently, the schools that are mentioned here on this list, they provide direct access for support for young people. So if you're a parent of this school, any of the schools listed, your child, you should be able to get some support directly from the school if you have any issues in terms of young people and mental well-being. Yeah. So yeah, I'll give you a snapshot of this later on. I mean, when I email it to you, but it's not available in all schools, but they are piloting in some schools in the borough to see if it works, and hopefully in the future, maybe in other schools. Susan, do you know much about this? Susan?
I don't. It's the first I've heard about it, and I'd probably like to know a little bit more in an email.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a number there, Susan, on there. You can contact them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so hopefully, you know, our school can participate in the future. So the ones that are listed are currently only for pilot. Yeah. So it's great that, you know, in our borough that we know the local schools are actually providing more active support. Not all of them, but some of them listed here. Moving on, Romina.
Okay, so yeah. So there are, you know, one of the great things about the internet is that there's lots of online support. So these are some of the apps for young people that are available. So Me Too is a free app designed for teenagers wanting to get support with their mental health. It's a forum where they can connect with therapists or other teenagers to discuss their difficulties. Think Ninja is an app for 10 to 18-year-olds where they can learn about mental and emotional well-being and develop skills to stay well there. So during the pandemic, Think Ninja is free, and Chill Panda offers breathing, exercising, and other techniques to take your mind off worries. But I've heard of many, many more local ones, and also ones that are national. So please, you know, have a look at the NHS apps library and a Google and ask your local services, you know, about the apps that are available. So, you know, one that was available around Redbridge was WhatsApp, WhatsApp, and that was like a free online service where they can interactively talk to their therapist. So there are many. So please have a look online. There we go.
Yeah, well done, Romina. You did really well. Thank you very much. So lastly, just about us in terms of moving forward and how you can get involved with us. So next week we have a workshop on managing worry. It's a very practical based workshop, and the person facilitator will give you examples of how to do that. So I think I always recommend, you know, those kind of workshops. It's very interesting. So please, next week on the 24th of March, we have a workshop at 11 o'clock. Please attend. In April, we're planning to do a workshop on Islam and mental well-being on the 14th of April. And we'll have an eating disorder workshop on the 29th of April. So if you want to participate, when I attend those, please do. If I don't have your email, I'm sure I might have most of your emails. If I don't, and you know that you haven't engaged with us before and it's the first time you've come along to this workshop, please do forward me your email before you leave. But most likely, if you've been here before, that I will email this information anyway through the posters that we send out. But that's it from us in terms of what we're going to be doing. And if you have any suggestions and ideas for workshops, we're also considering that for the next 3 months. So please do let us know any workshop that you might think will be helpful for the community, and we'll help to facilitate in the future. These are my contact details. My email address is there, and my phone number is there. I'm happy for you to contact me whenever you can. I'm okay with that. We've got a Facebook and YouTube. On our YouTube channel, this video will go on a YouTube channel. But all the workshops that we've done in the last 4 or 5 weeks, they're also on our YouTube channel. So you can go and see it there. They're actually a very helpful resource. And we have Instagram, and obviously we have a Twitter. So please come along and, you know, like us and follow us on those. So this is it. Any questions before we finish up our workshop? Has anybody got any questions? Have I seen any messages on there, Ramina? Chat?
There are a few messages. So Mashuda has said that City Gateway are doing ESOL assessments for women's only. Is it coaching children to stay and play? So she's given the address for that. So if you want to take that from the chat, thank you, Mashuda, for sharing that. And Shanaz has said that we need to encourage our brothers to get involved as well. Parenting is both, you know, both parents. So yeah, I think you're right. We should be getting fathers involved in these discussions as well. And we've had a father involved. You know, Taran's been very, very active here today. So thank you so much. But yeah, thank you all for your contributions.
So, I mean, I'm assuming there are no questions. I'm going to give it, any questions, anybody? Last few seconds.
Yeah, I'm just wanted to say, can you do any like workshop involving the imams or the like religious leaders, like imams or the people who are working with mosque, this figure of society? Then they can take the mental healthness, the information with them, and then they can maybe post someone or giving people support from their space.
I think that's a really important area of work, Shada, because obviously in our community, especially for men, in the masjids where, you know, where we have information, and the imam are sort of the key figures in our community.
Yeah.
We have plans to work with imams locally, but there's also a national, like, you know, workshop being organized at this right moment that are training imams. So I can give you some information around that. But definitely in the future, locally, the idea,
especially Bangladeshi communities,
right.
Yeah,
that's right. So in Tower Hamlets, obviously the plan is to undertake this work in the future. I tried it in the past, but that's something we're going to be doing, because I think obviously to reach the men in the community is slightly a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So that is one of the approaches that we're going to be taking as an organization moving forward. It's like to have more khutbahs, and more imams around mental health, have signposted information in masjids, give them some signposting directory, and, you know, when people need help and support. But inshallah, in the future, that's definitely a plan for us moving forward.
Yeah.
And obviously, we need people's support and whatnot, so that'd be great. So yeah, but thank you very much for that.
Yeah, if you give us the information, then we can pass it to our local mosque, like Bristol's mosque, and then Imam will, you know, they can participate on these workshops.
What I can do for Bristol, I can give you there's a course happening this Sunday for imams.
Okay. Can you? You got my email. I think I sent it to you. So
if you've given it, then what I'll do, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Then maybe what you can do is forward it to the imams in your masjid.
Yeah, I could.
And then
we have a WhatsApp group. I can post it to them on there.
Definitely, please do that then, because then I'll forward it to you later on. I'll send you the details where you can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else? Turan, you want to say something?
Susan was before me.
Go on, Susan. Susan, you want to say something, Susan?
I think I have my hands up all the way through, to be honest. But
you got a legacy hand. That's what we're.
I know, haven't I? I just wanted to say though, while I've unmuted myself, I think it was a really useful discussion to be had, and it's nice that everyone that's participating in it and felt happy. So I'm sort of quite privileged to be able to be invited along today. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Susan, for taking part. And I think you're right though. Today's discussion will be really good, because I mean it's been really interactive. And that's what we wanted from this, this session really, is for people to participate. And it's been like that. So I'm really pleased from an organizer's perspective that it's been like that. Ron, would you say something, mate?
Yeah, firstly, a bit personal. I haven't seen you it's been about 20 years. So I've gave you my mobile number.
Yeah,
I expect a phone call after this.
Okay.
What I wanted to say is, you're not that busy, are you? What I wanted to say is, we've been talking about the stigma and, the Bangladeshi parents or parents in general, they can't speak to their children. What I was thinking was, it would really be good if you could have a workshop with parents and children.
Mm.
Yeah, because one of my cousin sisters, her daughter was going through her teenage years, you know, puberty and all of that, and she told me that she went over to East London Mosque, and she explained, you know, it's that time, you know, of her life cycle and this and that. She's going through this, so, you know, we're going through all these discussions. So when it becomes awkward for the parents to discuss, but if the children are aware that, you know, the parents, and it could be, it doesn't have to be hormonal. I can't even say the word. It doesn't have to be hormonal. It can be, you know, it can be general, anything. It can be, you know, like some of the topics that we've touched on today. You know, and the children might come forward and they might say, you know, how do we get help and this and that, and it'll be good that both the child and the parent are aware of what sort of revenues there are there, and agencies there are that can help.
Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. I mean, I'm a community type of activist in this, and I think obviously schools need to take a bit more responsibility in sort of addressing those issues, be slightly a bit more proactive. I mean, an organisation like us, we have no resources whatsoever, to be honest with you. It was all done voluntarily, purely. So, I mean, we are dependent on the schools to, you know, facilitate those discussions with parents and children. And it's something that, you know, we need to campaign for, really. I don't think it happens enough in schools.
You know what? It's I've worked in schools for many years now, and I've worked really closely with like lots of kids who have had lots of sorts of needs, complex to not so complex. But when you have this sort of service in a school, the child then is kind of reluctant to go forward and come forward and seek that help.
Yeah, I understand. I think it's definitely something that to think about, because one of the things I was thinking about, because we have lots of, you know, Bangladeshi football clubs and lots of Bangladeshi parents supporting their children. One of the things, ways I was thinking about is engaging with those football associations and having sessions with parents and dads. And that possibly would be a good way to engage with parents, dads, men, and the children as well at the same time. So that's potential, but we have limited resources, unfortunately, and we have lots of ideas. So obviously we need help and we need volunteers. So if there's anybody out there that wants to help us, you know, do this kind of work, we're happy to support and, you know, have you on board. And I think somebody mentioned about doing this workshop in Bengali. As Romina said, we have done this workshop in Bengali on 28th of January, and that video is actually on YouTube, so you can have a look at that. But there are plans in the future, maybe in the next few months, to do this in Bengali again. But this is a workshop that there is slight demand in it, and we will sort of like do it on a regular basis. Any other questions before we finish? Before I say my goodbyes to everybody and thank everybody? All right, great. So we'll finish. I mean, firstly, I would like to thank Romina. I think you've been, you know, it was a really good presentation and we had really good discussions. So we'd like to thank you for helping us and supporting us. And everybody that's taken part today, you know, and come and attended, you know, thank you very much. And I hope you benefited in some way. I hope the information is going to help you and, you know, you can pass it on to others. What I will do, I'll share this information with you, the slides. I'll share the link for the video with you, hopefully by Friday or Monday, so you can see it. And please do forward it and pass it on to others. So I'm going to be stopping the video at this right moment then.